What is up, YouTube? What is up, G3 fam? G3 Iron here with another one of our Patron build specials. So thanks so much to our patron Crispinian. He's a G3 Elite $10 supporter, and so he's getting a build guide video in comparison today. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do some build surgery on his build. He is following a build. He's got a build guide that he's following, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at his build, where his character is at, and then where the build guide is at, and where there's some room for him to match up or grow in his own build, and to give him some pointers, to give him some tips, to give him some things that he should be aiming at as he continues his build. So he is playing the most meta of meta builds for this league. Even though he's a new player, he selected an excellent build. He's coming over from Diablo 2. He's an old pro, an old vet with Diablo 2, and so he's coming over. He's got an exceptional clear speed build that he has picked. Almost 20% of all leagues right now in Incursion League are playing Elementalists of some form, and the vast majority of those are actually playing Elementalist Blade Vortex with triple Herald, which is exactly what Crispinian is playing. So he's following this build guide by DirtyDot, which was posted in March of this year. And just for some popularity comparison, just so you realize how popular this build is, this was posted at like as soon as we were going to know about Incursion League, and like just take a look. Like it's got 232 page views. Like, or not views, pages of comments, like 232 pages of comments. Like this is the build, this league. Like there are builds that have been around for several different leagues that don't have this amount of views and discussion and interaction and popularity. Like this build, triple Herald, Blade Vortex, Elementalist, this is the build, this league. Anyway, so we're going to jump in. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the build, the build's mechanics, and what exactly Crispinian can do to improve his build. So first off, the first thing that I noticed as soon as I took a look at Crispinian's character, as well as the build guide put together by DirtyDot, is to follow your passive tree. So right here is the passive tree at level 91, which Crispinian is level 85. So he's got 6 levels to go. So he should have about 6 passives to go before he's going to match up and line up with the build guide perfectly. And overall, you can kind of see where Crispinian's at. He's over to the left towards Templar. He's above the Witch. That's where you start, of course, and then over towards the Shadow for some crit. And that's exactly what the build guide calls for. The build guide calls for going up, grabbing the jewel socket that's just above the Witch, grabbing the crit that's over near the Shadow, and then focusing on the life that's down near the Marauder, as well as grabbing the elemental damage and increased area over near the Templar. So far, so good. It looks rather similar. We're pretty happy. You look over here, you see increased area, increased area of effect, as well as increased spell damage. You see we've got our mana, we've got our jewel socket up here, which is great. You can scale your flat damage with your jewels. We'll talk more about jewels in a little bit. We've got the crit nodes already filled out over here for Shadow. Looks good. You come south, and going south is where the passive tree goes south on here. So Crispinian, if you're watching, some things that you can do to improve your build right away. So notice that the build guide, granted it may be that there are some tweaks in the leveling build guide that DirtyDot's got, but coming all the way down here to Constitution, like all the way to the bottom to grab the HP nodes by Marauder, that's as far south as you should go. So you're probably coming over here and grabbing Enhanced or Exceptional Performance, and then grabbing Profane Chemistry because you want more life. That's totally fine. It gives you more survivability, and the skill duration is giving you the longer lasting blades on every single blade. So I get that maybe those are 2 reasons for why you'd want to do that. Grab some more life and grab some more skill effect for your Blade Vortex so you don't have to cast as much. If you personally prefer that, that's fine. You can do that. But just so you know, if you follow the build guide to a T, it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 11 passive points that you've already got. Not that you're behind, not that you need to go level. That's 11 passive points that you've got right here that you could rearrange them to go to where they're supposed to go for the end game build tree. So that should give you some more passives, like over here towards the Templar side where you haven't quite filled everything out yet. You can grab your jewel socket. You can grab Devotion to give you some more life. Like, again, Devotion is 8% life versus you come all the way down here to Profane Chemistry. It's 6% life with 3% and then recovery off of flasks. Whereas this is just going to give you 3% increase effective non-curse auras you cast, which you cast triple heralds. Like, those are 3 auras that you're casting. So you're increasing your effectiveness of your DPS and your heralds, as well as getting a bigger individual chunk of life if you're able to make it over here. Anyway, that's one just suggestion right away as soon as I was dissecting your build and looking at DirtyDot, is just follow the build guide as closely as you can. I understand, again, if you're making some decisions, and maybe that was a decision that you made for to keep Blade Vortex up, as well as to grab some more life. So that's understandable, but in general, follow your passive tree. The second tip that we want to give is we want to check the stats and the rolls on your gear. So we're going to take a look right here at Crispinian's gear, and then we're going to take a look at DirtyDot's gear, and we're going to take a look at some of the differences. And some of these differences are going to be rather large. Some of them are not going to be that big. So first off, we're going to take a look at impulses. This is the thing that makes the build go. So we notice first off right away that the build guide is using a 6-link impulses, which is a little bit of why, you know, when he says it's solo self-found viable and it's very, very tanky and it's you know, a good league starter. Like, no, it's not. A 6-link impulsa right now, especially because the meta is very, very pricey, because there's high demand for them. Everybody wants one. So if you can get lucky and get a 6-socket and roll it with your fusings, great, you're going to make a ton of money this league. If you're not able to find one in solo self-found, not really going to work out for you. And if you're playing in a trade league, you're going to need to save up some currency, because a 6-link is going to cost you something unless you roll it yourself and you get lucky. So we notice right away he's got 38% increased effective shock, 74% to maximum life, and then he's got 39% increased damage if you shocked an enemy recently. So let's go ahead and take a look at Crisp's version of the impulses. He's got 71 life. Okay, so 3 less life. That's a good roll. 28% damage if you've shocked an enemy recently, and then 30% effect, increased effective shock. So we see here that this has got a little bit better rolls on the increased damage and a little bit better increased shock effectiveness. 10% difference on the increased damage of shocked enemy, as well as 8% difference on the increased effect of shock. So that right there is going to be a big difference. Like, that may seem like a small thing, but you want to check the stats and the rolls on your gear, because even if you've got an item that's got the right rolls on it, the right stat lines on it, it could be that it's a very low-end stat, and it could be when you're looking at your DPS or your defenses on a build guide, you're going, hey, why does he have such and such numbers and I don't? This can be one of them, is actually looking at the numbers on an item. So it's not just that it's a unique, it's, hey, this is unique with perfect rolls, or hey, this is a unique with near to perfect rolls, versus, hey, this is what a build guide looks like with a unique that's nowhere close to being perfect. So that's the first thing. This looks pretty good, but if you can upgrade it, a base impulses is probably 50 to 80 chaos right now. It may have gone up, but probably just a base. No, we're not talking 5-6 socket or 5-6 link. Just a base impulses is probably 50 to 90 chaos, and then you can always buy Jeweler's Touch. Jeweler's Touch usually goes for between 30 to 35 chaos that you could buy just to link that. So you're looking at about anywhere between 80 to 120. Chaos, just to replicate what you've got with slightly better numbers, but those numbers could mean a great deal of damage for you. When you consider the 10% difference increased damage if you shocked an enemy recently, you're always going to have that stat line rolling for you, because you're always shocking stuff. So the trick here is that when you get that 10% increased damage, like, that's effectively another passive node. Like, if you thought about it on your tree, like if you saw, hey, just 10% increased damage on the passive tree, you'd be like, hey, yeah, I'll take that. That's great. 10% increased damage. Of course, that's a great node. So if you can get that on your gear, that's fantastic. It makes a really big difference. So check the stats and the rolls on your gear. So let's take a look at some of the daggers and some of the weapons that he recommends. So first off, here's a Dire Stinger. It's got global critical strike chance. It's got lightning damage on it. It's got good attack speed. It's got critical strike chance for spells, and then gains 25% of physical damage as extra lightning damage, which is a key global stat. For anybody that's running Blade Vortex with the triple heralds, that's going to be a lot of extra damage that's going to be coming in. He's also got this scepter that he's showing off. Add 3 to 8, 108 lightning damage to spells. It's got flat increased spell damage. It's got increased elemental damage, which is going to increase all of your damage sources. It's got 106% increased critical strike chance for spells, which is huge. Gain 30% of physical damage as extra fire damage. We would rather that's probably lightning, but that's a really nice looking mace. We've got the Rune Song Copper Crisp. This looks great. It's got increased attack speed, so that's going to be great for our Blade Vortex. It's got 105% increased critical strike chance for spells. Again, great. It's got global crit strike multi, which is huge, and then there's our tier 1 physical damage as extra lightning. Boom. That right there, that Chris right there is amazing. Like, it shouldn't be named Chris. It should be named Copper Chad, because that is that's a Chad dagger right there. That's what that is. And then lastly, he's showing off this one-handed mace. Increased elemental damage on the implicit, 13% increased spell damage, 108 increased critical strike chance for spells. Global crit strike multi is good. The mana on that is a bummer of a roll, but then gain physical as extra fire damage, and then damage penetrates 7% elemental resistances. That's another really nice weapon. So when we compare that with what we're running right now on Crisp, so we can see here on our first weapon, we've got increased spell damage. That's good. We've got global increased critical strike chance. Those are both good. We've got increased critical strike chance for spells rolled on the weapon. That's good. And then we've got chance to poison on hit. Not that great because we're not scaling poison damage. It's good that you crafted on there global critical strike multiplier, but if you can get that on the base of the weapon, it's going to increase your damage because it actually rolls higher as a base stat than it does for you to master craft it on there. So that's one of those stat lines that you want to definitely get included in on the weapon. Okay, let's take a look at his next weapon. His next weapon is called the Armageddon Fang, and it's got on there 50% increased global critical strike chance, 30% increased spell damage, 9 to intelligence. That's a bummer. Then it's got some flat fire, flat lightning. Then it's got global crit strike multi, and then global critical strike that we've crafted on there. Oh no, that's local. Increased critical strike chance. That's local on there. So I would say those are okay, but there's a lot of room for improvement here. I will just let you know, and I'll send you this in a PM on Discord, Crispinian, if I haven't already. But you can look up some of these stats and just go on the trade website. Just go to the official Grinding Gear trade website and look up some of these stats. I would prioritize physical damage as lightning, crit strike multi, and crit strike chance. Those are the 3 things that I would look for. And you're probably going to find a weapon at this point in the league, probably for an X or 2. So again, this is not something that's cheap that you're just going to go, oh yeah, I'll go get that today. But it's something that you can work towards, and your DPS is going to skyrocket. So this is what DirtyDot says. He says dual wield either 2 daggers or dagger and a scepter. Stats to look for: critical strike chance for spells. This one's the priority. Spell damage, elemental damage, crit strike, and then gain percentage of physical damage as an element. Yep, that's the big thing to do. So check the rolls and the stats on your gear. It could be that the gear that you've got has got a stat that's really desirable. So like on this dagger, it's really desirable to have crit strike chance. That's really, really good. But when you compare the crit strike chance on that versus the crit strike chance on this dire stinger, 98% increased critical strike chance for spells versus 21%. Right, again, so we're not saying this is bad, we're not saying this is garbage, we're not saying, oh man, why did you do that? We're saying, hey, you're finding the good stuff, now let's look for it and increase the numbers. So typically when you're looking to buy a weapon like this, first off, you want to look for those 3 stats that you're looking for. Don't add any numbers when you're doing a trade search. Just look for those 3 stats and see what the market price is going for those 3 stats. Then when you populate a list that's pretty large, that's giving you a wide range, then you can start to add in some numbers and say, okay, is this, let's say, does it have 50% increased global critical strike chance as a minimum threshold, or maybe 70 or 80, rather than simply looking right away for this one right here, because those incremental purchases are going to allow you to farm faster and farm more efficiently in order to get those big GG endgame items. So definitely be on the hunt for those. The next thing that we're going to look at just really quickly is his Steeldraconis. His Steeldraconis has got the 40% increased Blade Vortex spell damage Uber enchantment, which is huge. And on yours right now, you've got the Reeve Radius, which is just kind of funny because we're not using Reeve, so it's not really doing anything for us. So does that mean that we need to go and do Uber Lab and farm this all day in order to get it? No, it's not something that you need to do. But 40% increased Blade Vortex spell damage, like a ton of your damage comes from your Blade Vortex, obviously. And so if you saw a passive node on your passive tree that for 1 point just said, hey, go and get me. Hey, go get me. I'm 40% increased damage to your primary melee damaging spell. Would you go get that? Like, I would. I'm pretty sure you would as well. So think about it that way. Think about it in terms of time spent. You may wonder, yeah, but I'll farm the lab and I'll never get that. Okay, that's true. But look at it this way. If you were to farm for one level right now and you're at level 85, let's say it takes you 2 or 3 hours of grinding in maps in order to hit level 86, right? So think of those 2 to 3 hours that you'd spend grinding maps to get that one passive point. Are you willing to spend 2 to 3 hours grinding the lab, or paying other people to carry you through the lab, or paying other people simply to buy a Steeldraconis with 40% increased blade vortex? Are you willing to grind for those 2 to 3 hours to earn the currency to buy it off of somebody, so that way you don't have to grind it out? Think about it in terms of efficiency. Hey, if I was grinding for that passive point for 2 or 3 hours on the passive tree, what would that look like in comparison for buying it off the market or farming it myself? Then, of course, we've got the Hrim Sorrow. We've got rare boots for a bunch of different resistances as the build guide recommends. And then, of course, Stygian Vise, because Stygian Vises are OP, because you can stick an Abyssal Jewel inside there. Oh, because Abyssal Jewels are amazing. So other than that, I would say your build, just looking over your stuff, looks pretty good. Your rings look pretty good. Your boots look pretty good, pretty comparable. Your resistances look good. The one thing that I'm going to say to you, just really focus in on here as another item, is your amulet. So this was the other thing that stood out as you want to check the stats and roll on your gear. So let's take a look at this amulet really quick. You've got global increased cold damage, which that's good because Herald of Ice shatter stuff. We want to do lots and lots of cold damage in order to chill and then shatter stuff. That's great. But then we've got 11% to global critical strike multiplier. Now we've got some resistances on there. We've got some mana on there for our mind over mana, which is great. That's defenses. We've got some flat life. That's great. But take a look at that global critical strike. 11. All right, now let's go and take a look at the amulet that DirtyDot recommends. Okay, I'm just going to move this over just really quick so you can see the full amulet. Take a look at this full amulet. 25 to strength, then it's got 20% increased global critical strike chance, 34% to global crit strike multi, and then of course some defensive stats, max mana, max life, and then all elemental resistances. So when we compare that, it's got crit strike multi and crit strike chance. So again, I would simply go out there, look on the market. Your crit strike multi isn't terrible. It's good that it's on there. But when you compare it, it's more than 20 points behind what the recommended amulet is for your build. Again, this could be a very, very expensive amulet. It could be something that you go for later on in the league as you build up currency. But the fact that it's got global critical strike chance and global critical strike multiplier, that's going to be another huge DPS boost as opposed to simply looking at the increased cold damage. Because the critical strike is gonna essentially happen with the effect of all 3 of your heralds, plus every time that you're hitting, it's got a chance to crit with your blade vortex. So tons of damage can get added simply by upgrading that amulet. Okay, we're going to move on to our third tip. So check your jewels. So jewels, because of Abyss Jewels and because of Abyss League and the way how it works, like, they can get really ridiculous. Okay, so on here he's got some examples, and then we're just going to take a look really quick. But jewels, crit multi, life, and then some extra damage mods are really good. I would say if you can get 30 flat life onto your Abyss Jewels, like, and I think you've got one of them that's got 30 life on it. Let's take a look here. Yeah, 35 maximum life onto this particular Abyss Jewel, so that's good. Then you've got some accuracy and some crit multi-strike. That's good. If you can find a bunch of jewels that are like that, that's great. You've got increased damage on here, increased lightning resist, and then crit strike multi while you're dual wielding. Okay, that's good. That applies to everything that you're doing. But I would say even if you want to, I would look for another one of these gems, like another gem. Just do a search, 35 maximum life, and see what that looks like. And then again, with those passive points that you've got, go ahead and fill out a jewel socket here. Even if you want to spend another 2 points to fill out another jewel socket here, like, there's a bunch of damage that you can grab just by really quickly grabbing jewel sockets. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 points up here, and that gives you a little bit extra mana. Anyway, that's if you really want to deviate from your passive tree and you're looking for how you can do that efficiently, jewels are one of the best ways that you can do that. Jewels a lot of the time are actually more effective for your personalized build than passive points just on their own. So anyway, that's what I would say regarding jewels. Like, check the jewels that are being used by your build guide, but then always take a look at where are the close sockets in the passive tree for you to be able to actually dump some currency into those passive slots, because there's a ton of flat damage that can come from that. Okay, lastly, one bonus tip is to check your links. So check your links and your gems. So if you look here on his blade vortex, he's got set up added fire damage, controlled destruction, physical delightning, increased critical strike, efficacy, power charge on critical, increased critical damage, or concentrated effect. So essentially, he's got a couple of different options. He says replace added fire damage with hypothermia. once you get the Beacon of Ruin. Last slot is situational. Use Conk Effect on tough bosses, etc. When we go and we look at your build, and we see what we've got here on our Blade Vortex. Our Blade Vortex right now is being supported by, and I'm going to move this just so that way we can see everything. Our Blade Vortex, that's great. Looks good. It's level 20 max, and it's got 10% quality. Okay, that's great. But then we've got our Physical to Lightning. Okay, that looks good. Then we've got faster casting. That's going to be a problem. If you can change that out, like immediately, whether or not you want to change that out for increased area of effect, Conk Effect if you want to go against bosses, another couple of blues that you might even want to check are just Power Charge on critical, or increased critical strike damage, or increased critical strike chance. Like this right here, faster casting is a DPS threshold for you. Take that out. I know it takes a second to spin up your Whirling Blades, or not your Whirling Blades, your Blade Vortex. I know that takes a second to do at the start of a map, but it'll seriously skyrocket your DPS, because right now this gem is doing you next to nothing for your damage. Then you've got Controlled Destruction. Okay, that looks good. And then you've got Hypothermia. Okay, that looks good. So one of the ways that we can just really quickly improve this is to check your links and to go, okay, so right now we're essentially using 4 out of the 6 links that are recommended. So those 2 extra links can really, really push your DPS to the next level. Then the next thing to look at is Orb of Storms plus Arcane Surge with Power Charge on crit. Like, this is huge, and I'm just going to read this straight up from DirtyDot because it's a beautiful explanation. This is the Give Me More Juice button. Arcane Surge gives 13% more damage. Remember, more is multiplicative, not additive. That's good. It's way better than increased. Extra cast speed to spin up the blades faster, and some mana regen on top of that. And you also get Power Charges when it crits. If you're already using Power Charge on crit with Blade Vortex, replace it with Blind here. Important, keep Arcane Surge a low level so it gets triggered by a single cast of Orb of Storms. In other words, you don't need to level up your Arcane Surge in order to get the benefits from Arcane Surge. Just keep it level 1, let it give you Arcane Surge, and let yourself have that 13% more damage buff whenever you want it up, which is great. You've got Blind support, you've got Herald of Thunder, you've got Curse on hit, you got Warlord's Mark. That's exactly what he wants in his sockets. Over here is where we've got our cast when damage taken, increased duration, Warlord's Mark, Immortal Call. Okay, that looks good. Like, our links look pretty good here. Definitely it's the chess piece that we can really, really improve. And then the other thing that's kind of interesting, that's kind of a fun little trick setup, is if you want to set up this, which is Herald of Ice, Culling Strike, and Onslaught. So he says don't use this setup with Impulse's Arma, as it steals Herald's kills most of the time. But if you have Impulses and want to clear even faster, you can use it to this setup borrowed from the Auto Bomber build, which is Herald of Ice, Ice Bite, Innervate, and then Critical Strike. Now he says this will reserve a lot of mana, so you'll either need to switch to a Watcher's Jewel-based mini Mind Over Mana, or unspec Mind Over Mana altogether, which would have a negative impact on survivability. So this is one of the things that's great about this build guide, and that's so great about this build in general, is because it's so flexible. So again, if you go back to that first tip, like following the passive tree, if you want to get creative with it, you can. Just make sure what you're doing is really, really efficient. So increased skill duration, yes, that's great. It's quality of life. You don't have to spin as many blades. But what if you were able to say, hey, all of these points are going to be converted into damage, and I'm just going to blow things up a lot faster, right? So it's a trade-off, and it's an option for what you want to do if you want to take it. Because there are these, again, additional jewel sockets that are available, and additional spots on the tree where you can grab some more damage. And even grab some more survivability with life as you're going through it. So excellent build. You've chosen a great build to follow, honestly, Crispinian. Like, this is the meta build, and you picked this without even knowing much about the game. Like, it's pretty great. The last thing that I do want to say is just one thing to note on DirtyDot. He says you can use Blood Rage if you can sustain it. In other words, if you have enough regen in order to build Frenzy Charges. I do just want to correct this notion. If you're using a flask of staunching that actually removes bleeding and makes you immune to bleeding, you can actually run around. You can cast Blood Rage, which lasts, like, base duration is like 9 or 10 seconds. You can cast Blood Rage, go kill something, gain up your Frenzy Charges, and then you don't even have to kill anything. You can simply stop the bleeding effect, and you'll no longer lose that HP, but you'll keep on the frenzy effect from the Blood Rage. It's a really fun exploit. I've been using that both on my Gladiator as well as on my Magic Find Ranger Deadeye, because it's just great. It's free Frenzy Charge duration. Like, you just press one button, and then you press your Flask of Staunching, and you're like, hey, I'm not bleeding anymore, and now I've got Frenzy Charges. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks again, Crispinian, so much for your support to the Patreon, and thanks so much to all of our supporters. So thanks to Lightbulb, to Crispinian, our two elites, to our guildies, to Vincent. If you're interested or have any questions about your build, I would encourage you to head on over to our Patreon site, which you can check out the link down below. If you've got comments for Crispinian, or maybe you've got ideas for how he can improve his build, maybe I left something out, maybe I misspoke, feel free to let us know down in the comments below. And as always, have a great rest of your day, and like and subscribe for more daily PoE content.